Good evening. This is Matthew Tilley, and it is Tuesday evening at 7:30, which means if you're watching this Tuesday at 7:30, that you're watching me live. So thank you for joining me. If you're watching this at some other day or time, that means you're watching the recording or listening to the recording, and thank you for joining me that way too. But either way, I hope I'm helping you a little bit in your on a weekday evening. I always try to, I call this midweek encouragement, which I do this for my podcast, which I call Seeking Christ in the Scriptures. But it's a way to brighten the week a little bit, give you something to think about together. Always enjoy the interaction. So if you've got questions, drop them in here. I think I can see comments when they come through. So I'll try to respond to those towards the end. But if we don't get to talk on this, hopefully we'll talk soon. But I had a chance. So before I get started, just a thought that's on my mind. I had a chance. I had to go run a couple of quick errands this evening after I'd finished with work before this started, and I got a chance to just ride through the countryside and went a little bit of a different way than I normally would go, just to kind of check out some stuff. I just was in a driving mood, and my goodness, we live in a beautiful part of the world. Those of you that live up here in the high country of North Carolina, you know what I'm talking about. Those of you that don't and maybe been up here, you know what I'm talking about. But it's just really pretty. And this evening, a little hazy out. I think there's some smoke from it's drifting. They're telling me it's drifting down from Canada. Who knew that it would drift that far? But it's sort of hazy a little bit, but not too bad. And it's just pretty. And some of those hills and hollers, and man, I really enjoyed driving around. But this God has made a beautiful place right here, and we're grateful to be here right now. And then on Sunday, those of you that are North Beaver Baptist folks, you were able to be with us for a baptizing, which was a great experience. Was able to baptize a man who has confessed faith in Jesus, and I was glad to be able to do that. We did it in the river, which to me, I know that's probably not a big deal to some people, but to me, that's a big deal. It's kind of a new thing, and I was excited to do that. So I was really happy. We had a great day at church on Sunday. And if you happen to be in and around West Jefferson, Ashe County, maybe even in Wilkes County, and you just want to take a little drive, you're in and around this area, Allegheny County for that matter, y'all come on over. Watauga, y'all come on over and visit with us. We're right there on 163 in West Jefferson. We'd love to have you. But anyway, just was thinking this afternoon about what all the Lord has done for us this past week, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm trying to enjoy it. I hope those of you that are members at North Beaver, you're enjoying it as well. What the Lord's doing. But we're going to take some time right now and study Mark, the Gospel of Mark. We've been doing this really since last fall. And for now, I don't see any reason to stop. So we're just going to keep going. I've gotten a lot of good feedback, and I'm telling you, y'all are encouraging me too much. So you keep telling me you like it, I'm gonna keep doing it. So, but seriously, I'm enjoying doing this. You're telling me you enjoy this, so we're gonna keep studying. Mark is probably what I'll just keep doing for now. I've got a some more obviously some more chapters we want to do in this book, so that's probably what we'll keep doing for a while. But I always have my mind, looking for the next thing to study and to learn with. So if you've got any thoughts on that, I'll welcome them from you. I'll take your feedback. If you have any particular thoughts that you would like or something you'd like to study with me, I always like people that are studying alongside of me. But tonight we're going to look in Mark chapter 6. We're up to chapter 6 in the book, and we're in towards the end of that book, actually, or end of that chapter, excuse me, starting in verse 45 and going down to the end of the chapter. And it's an interesting story that takes place here, but just to kind of give you a little bit of prelude to it, I want to. This is the way I want to set this up for you. I want to see God work. Um, I believe that God can and has and does change people's lives and transform lives. I want to see that. And I want to know that when it's happening, not that I've done it. I mean, I'd love to be able to be used of God in that way, but I just want to be able to see him do that. And that's something that I've been praying on really all the way back, I really could count back to 2005 when that prayer began for me, of really asking the Lord, hey, God, I want to see you do something. I want to see that. And I've seen him do that for me in some ways. He gave me a calling to preach the gospel, to be a pastor. I believe he has given me a love for his people and the church. I believe he's opened doors for me to serve and to be encouraged by his people. And I've seen him work in the lives of others as well. So he's answered that prayer. I've seen people who, who were really at the end of their lives, but have grace from God to be able to go through a terrible time. I've seen on the negative side. I'm not one of these guys that sees demons everywhere, but I've seen the devil come out of some people, and I know that's God himself working to show people for what they are. Sometimes he's working in small ways, sometimes he's working in big ways, but I will admit to you that he has worked, yet my faith is always weak on this, where I know he has worked before, but it's almost like I doubt, is he going to do it anymore? But I think that I know the answer is he's going to do it again. And a text like today, like we're going to look at today, really reminds us that if Jesus has done something before, if God has performed something before, and by the way, we all could give testimony. I think almost everybody that's listening in could give testimony that what God has done for you, and if not for you, what he's done for other people, that you can say that was God. And if God has done something before, and by the way, for you, or if you go all the way back to the beginning of time in the Bible, if God has done something before, I promise you, he's able and willing and ready to do it again. In Mark chapter 6, we read an incident. I'll just summarize it for you. We'll look at some of the verses here in just a moment. But we read an incident where the disciples are on a boat. They're sent across the water, the Sea of Galilee. And in the midst of that travel, there's a storm that comes up. And that incident is, and of course, I should add to this that Jesus intervenes in the situation, calms the storm, the whole thing. That there's an almost identical scenario that happens just a couple of chapters earlier. Chapter 4, verse 36, exact same thing happens. I say exact same. Its incident is very similar in that the disciples on a boat, they get across the water, the storm comes up, Jesus comes and calms the storm. Same idea that happens there. And since he has done that, so in chapter 4, he's calmed a storm. He's also delivered a demon-possessed man. He's brought a young woman back to life. He's healed a woman who had some kind of a blood disorder. He's fed thousands of people in the desert. And now he's in this position where in verse 45 of the text, he constrains his disciples. He insists, he forces, if you will, but he says, you guys go. He pushes them, says he constrained his disciples to get into the ship and to go to the other side before unto Bethsaida while he sent away the people. So you've got Jesus after he has calmed the storm, he has delivered, all the things he's done over the last 2 chapters. And now he's in that position again. And he says, I want you guys to go back across the Sea of Galilee. And I believe what you're going to see in this, and this is what I want you to hear, is that Jesus has done this before. He will, and he does do it again. Before we go any further, I want to stop just a moment and ask the Lord to help me as I teach this to you, help you as you listen. It would maybe a good idea for you just to pause right now and pray yourself and just ask the Lord to help you. Let's pray together. Lord, we're going to study your word, and because I believe your word has power, and we don't, we're going to come to you and ask you to use your word to make us what we ought to be, point out the sin, point out the area of need, and help us to come to you with our hands open, just saying, Lord, what do you want to give me? And I pray that everyone listening here will hear your word and obey it. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So in this story, you've got Jesus putting his disciples on a boat, and he says, go across the water. And when he goes, when they get on the boat and goes across the water, what does he do? Verse 46, He sends them away and he goes up into the mountain to pray. It's what he says. He departed into a mountain to pray. And then in verse 47, the ship in the evening, when the even was come, the ship was in the midst of the sea and he was alone on the land. So here we have Jesus on this mountain, the disciples on this boat in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and it's evening time. So it's dark, or about to become dark here. And it says in verse 48, he saw them toiling in rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them. It's about the fourth watch of the night. And what I want you to see with this is that they get out in the middle of the water, there's a storm. But here's the big thing. Jesus is fully aware of the situation. Did you see what he says there? It says in verse 48, he saw them toiling in rowing. Now, where was Jesus? He's not on the boat. He's not on the water beside of them. He's not hovering over them. Where is he? He's up in a mountain praying, yet he sees them. Now, he knew what he was going to do. In fact, that's what's going to happen here in verse 48. At the last part, it says, when he sees all this, he cometh unto them walking upon the sea, and would have passed by them. They're saying this, he's saying, listen, I was going to come by and get you anyway. That was the point. But he was fully aware of what was going on. He was fully aware of them. He knows what's happening. They felt alone. I can imagine. Can you imagine? Jesus has sent you out into the water and he says, you go on, I'll catch up with you later. And then the storm comes up and you're like, where is Jesus when you need him? Last time he was on the boat with us. That's what happened in chapter 4. He was on the boat with them. Last time he was on the boat with us. And now we're out here by ourselves. We just feel all alone. But I think the message for this part of the story is that Jesus fully is aware of what's going on. Take that personal, would you? Jesus understands fully what is going on in your situation. Let me read this out of Hebrews chapter 4. We have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace and help in the time of need. You're not facing any temptation that Jesus doesn't understand. There is not any bondage to sin or circumstance that he doesn't know that you're dealing with. There's no sickness that you have, no pain that you might be having, chronic or otherwise, that he doesn't feel intimately, deeply understand and feel. There's no heartache that you have that I have that he can't sympathize with. You might feel like, well, I'm in a situation that nobody else understands. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, you might be right. You might have a very unique situation that very, very few, if anybody, really understands. But I want you to know that Jesus is fully aware of your personal situation. And just like with his disciples here, he knew what was going on. But what does he do? When he knows in verse 48, when he sees them toiling, when he sees that they're having trouble, what does he do? He saw them, and then in the fourth watch of the night, he cometh unto them. He's got a plan. He knows what you're doing. He knows what you're in the middle of. He feels what you're feeling. And you might think he's far away. He might feel far away, but he is coming to your side. He is with you. He is not going to let you out of his sight. So first of all, Jesus is fully aware of your circumstances. But second of all, Jesus is absolutely active in your situation. So he's not merely aware of them. He is aware. He was up on the mountain. They're in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, but he sees what they're doing. But he doesn't just sort of say, well, I hate that they're in that. I'm watching them. Let's see how they handle this. No, he doesn't just watch them struggle. He comes to them. In fact, he doesn't let any obstacle get in his way. What is he doing? He walks upon the sea. Look at that. Look at that. You go back to that. Verse 48. He cometh to them walking upon the sea and would have passed by them. That phrase would have passed by them doesn't mean that he just didn't see them and he was going to walk by them like we might, hey, I was walking down the street and I would have passed right by you. That's not what that means. It means that he is working to get to where they are. He is walking so that he does come in contact with them. He's not waiting on anything. He's not waiting for the circumstances to be right. It's the worst time in the world. In fact, it's the fourth watch. This is between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. probably, which I mean, some of y'all have to get up and work at that time of day, and nothing good happens between 3 and 6 a.m. I mean, maybe get up at 5 a.m. and then kind of get going, and then maybe get out the door about 6:30. That I get that, but I mean, that's dark 30. I mean, that's just oh my goodness, it's dark. And on top of that, there's a storm that's brewing, and they're by themselves there. But Jesus says there's no obstacle that's too great. He comes directly to them. He would go right to them. He is going to do that. Now, what's interesting is when he does come, now remember, Jesus, he knows what's going on. He's active in the situation. But in verse 49, they don't even appreciate that he's there. They don't even appreciate who he is. It says in verse 49, and when they saw him walking upon the sea, they supposed it had been a spirit and cried out. So they're saying, we think that this is a problem. There's something there and we don't understand it. So we're scared about it. But what is Jesus's response to this? Even though they're scared, in verse 50, for they all saw him and were troubled. And he says, and immediately he talked with them and saith unto them, be of good cheer. It is I, be not afraid. He says, listen, guys, it's going to be okay. You can be of good cheer. I am here. I am your God, and I am here. And he says, don't be afraid anymore because I'm here. Again, take this personally. Please take this personally. Jesus is aware of your circumstances. He's not taken by surprise by them. They're not shocking him. He's aware of them, and he is intimately involved with what's going on. He's not leaving you alone in your struggle. I want to reiterate, I know you may feel, and at times I also feel, so that's why I'm assuming you do as well. We feel as if we're in this by ourselves. Nobody else cares. Maybe you've got a spouse or a family member or a mom or dad or whatever. You got somebody in your circle that maybe you can lean on, but beyond that, you've got nobody, and maybe you don't even have that, and you just feel like nobody hears you. Jesus knows you're in that circumstance, and he is making moves. He is active right now, moving towards you, working on that. Your only hope is to cry out to him. Even if you don't know that he's there, you don't even fully appreciate that he's there, you may not even fully believe that he is going to help you the way that you need to be helped. I just want you to know, just like the disciples, they didn't even understand what they had in front of them, but they just said, oh my goodness, what's going on? And he responds. He cares for you, and he's actively working on your situation. He's fully involved in it. And I want to just tell you, I mean, some of y'all need to hear this from somebody. It's going to be okay. God is with you, and you don't have to be afraid. Now, are you afraid? Sure you are. I understand that. I am sometimes. Does it feel like it's not going to be okay? Absolutely. But if God is involved, and he is, it's going to be okay. He's with you. You don't have to be afraid. Hold on to him. Continue to hold on to him. So again, first, he's aware of the situation. Then second of all, he's active in the situation. But then look what happens when he gets in there. He's not just coming to them and just sort of showing up on the scene. Sometimes this happens to me where I want to help somebody, and I'll show up. Maybe if they have like a car problem or something like, some kind of thing like that where they need some help, and I can show up and I can help, and I want to be a help to them, but I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm useless. I mean, I can call somebody, but I'm just not able to do that. Not that I don't want to. I just don't have the skill set. That's not Jesus. He's not just coming like Matthew and sort of, well, let's see if we can call somebody else. I'm here, but let's get somebody else involved. That's not Jesus. He actually, if you'll see in verse 51, he gets into the boat with them, and he stops the storm, because in verse 51, or rather verse 50, he tells them, don't be afraid. But in verse 51, he says, he went up unto them into the ship. So he goes and gets in the boat with them. And what happens? The wind ceased. Of course, they were sore amazed in themselves and beyond measure and wondered. But ultimately, Jesus is getting into the situation, actively putting himself in there, and he has authority over the circumstance. Nature itself is now, I mean, we're literally seeing nature itself bowing before her master. So he has authority over everything, not just a storm in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. He made everything so he can fix anything. Colossians chapter 1 says, this is verse 16 and 17, for by him were all things created that are in heaven, that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist. So let that sink in for just a moment. Yes, I know he made trees and weather, and we understand all that, but he made your body. So if there's something wrong with your body, God is able to heal that. Now, there's a whole discussion we can have about why he might not heal that. There may be reasons for that. I understand, but I just want you to know he is able to do it. He has power. He has authority over that. He made you. It says in that verse that he, whether it's visible or invisible, thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. The point of that is that whether we're talking about the spiritual world, some of us are dealing with, I think, could be oppression from the spiritual world. It could be depression in our own minds and hearts. It could be that there are governmental authorities. There might be court systems. All of these things that might seem like they're against us and fighting against us. Jesus is the one who has authority over it. All things were made by him, and by him all things consist. Everything. He's got power over power. There is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Romans 13, verse 1. He's got power over sin, over death, over hell. And whatever it is, just like this storm is threatening to wash over that boat and sink that boat, whatever it is that's threatening to destroy you, overwhelm you, swallow you up, Jesus has authority over it and power over it. He is, as it's relayed to us in Revelation 19, verse 16, I believe it is, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's got the power to fix literally anything. In fact, in this very story here, this gospel, he is healing sick people. He's opening blind eyes. He's raising the dead. And these are all examples of what God is doing. And this is what I believe God continues to do in this moment we're in now. He is returning the world, returning things that are broken to its right and proper order. I believe he does that today primarily by changing men's lives and women's lives and saving their souls and righting their relationship with God. I mean, I believe that's his primary activity. But in this moment, we're seeing Jesus. He is really showing us his ability to transform the world around us to be under his authority. And all that simply to say to you, and again, I want to try to help you to try to take this personal. This is not some big esoteric thought out there for somebody else. This is something you and I personally need. God has the power to fix everything. He's in charge of your circumstance. And your circumstance might be a painful one. It might be one where I've got some things that I'm dealing with that feel like they're out of my control. There's literally nothing I can do to put my hand on it. But God is able. God is in control. He has authority over each one of those things. And furthermore, let me get this point across to you. He's not done in this life. I love Revelation chapter 21, verses 4 and 5, where it says that God was going, this is at the end of time, he is going to wipe away all tears from our eyes. He's going to make it so there's no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There's no more pain. The former things, he says, are passed away, and he makes all things new. This is what God does. This is who he is. And I believe ultimately this is an ultimate promise that this is going to be the future. That's what when we say we're looking forward to going to heaven, that's what we're looking forward to. Revelation 21, where tears are gone, pain is gone, death is gone, all of that's gone. But I do also believe that glimpses of that grace poke through, sort of peek through from time to time in this life, which is why we have stories of people being healed of diseases and families being reconciled and circumstances that just don't seem like they should they can work out, somehow working out. That's not by chance. That's God working through this. Now, I've told you, Jesus is aware, Jesus is active, and Jesus has authority over your circumstances, your situation. You hear that? But now listen, look at what verse 50. Go back to that. In verse 50, Jesus tells them, don't be afraid. Okay? And the reason he's saying that to them, I believe, is he's done this before. If you go back to chapter 4 and verse 37 to 41, you'll see he says, he speaks to the seas, the storm, and it ceases, it stops its raging. He's done this before. It's not new to these disciples. They've seen this happen. Yet, in spite of that, in spite of reminding them, you don't have to be afraid. I'm here. I'm here. You remember when I did this before? In spite of that, look what happens in verse 52, or rather in last part of verse 51. They're sore amazed. They're just, wow, I can't believe this is going on. Verse 52, for they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their hearts was hardened. They should have known that Jesus had the power to do this, because hours before this, and in our reading, just a page or half a page before this, hours before this, they saw Jesus took 7 pieces of food and feed thousands of people. But even though they didn't have enough faith, and I can't get mad at the disciples. I have less faith than they had, but their faith was very weak. But in spite of that, look at what happens in verse 54. When they passed over, they came into the land of Gennesaret and drew to the shore. So they didn't. Their faith was so weak that their heart had been hardened. They should have known better. But Jesus, he's gracious and loving and kind, and he still helps them. But I do want you to notice what happens here to these other people that have faith in verse 54. And when they were come out of the ship, straightway they knew him. They knew him. I believe it's the people that are on the other side of the shore. I believe that's who he's talking about there. It could be interpreted as the disciples, but I believe they knew him as well. But verse 55, people understood that Jesus was on the scene. Look what happens. And ran through that whole region round about, and they began to carry in beds those that were sick, and where they heard he was. So you've got now people that know Jesus is here. I don't know if I'm portraying this correctly. You've got disciples who had been with Jesus, seen this. He had stopped a storm before. He fed thousands of people. They saw him release a man from a demonic possession. They saw all this happening, but were just shocked when it happened again. But then you have in verse 55 these people that said, "Oh wow, Jesus is here." And what do? They bring every problem in the world to him. And verse 56 says, and whithersoever Jesus entered, into villages or cities or country, they laid the sick in the streets. I mean, they've got people coming everywhere. Everywhere he is, they're just bringing people. I can imagine the mass of humanity that's being brought to Jesus, and besought him that they might touch, if it were but the border of his garment. And this is the phrase I want you to focus in on, that last phrase. And as many as touched him were made whole. Do you see that these people believed that Jesus would save them, that he would help them? They ran to him with eagerness, begging for his help, saying, I just want to touch the edge of your garment if I can do that. And when Jesus came through and he did touch them, it says there, anybody he touched, they were made whole. All of that is simply to tell you that if Jesus has done it before, and he has, I mean, if you don't believe me, you don't have to believe me. If you don't have it, let me know. I'll get you a copy of it. There's a Bible, 66 books of God's testimony of what he's done. On top of that, can I just add this to you? And I'm wrapping up here, but thank you for listening in. But on top of that, God continues to work in all around us. I had lunch on yesterday, with the pastor that I respect a lot. And he was relaying some of the stories of what God has done in his ministry. He's an older man now. What God has done in his ministry. And I sit there and listen to it. And I know he's not making any of this up. He's not embellishing. He's just giving the facts. And he's just telling me in his own way. I mean, yes, he's a good man. Yes, he knows God. Yes, he's a good preacher. There's all the good things that is about him. But ultimately, the impact that he has seen in his ministry is almost inexplicable. It's only possible because God uses this man, and hundreds and thousands of people come to Jesus. Churches grow. Why is that? Because this is the sort of thing God does. Some people that I know a man that I was able to witness and share the gospel with in Greensboro, and sitting in his house, and he said, "Yes, I need to do that." Speaking of confessing faith in Jesus, he did that, and God changed that man. I've seen it happen. I've seen God remove sin, forgive condemnation, or forgive sin and remove condemnation. I have seen him give peace that passes understanding. I've seen him run the devil off. I have seen him deliver people from sin bondage. I have seen him satisfy my deepest longings and my deepest desires. I have seen him heal physically. I have seen him help with emotional pain. I have seen him shine the light of understanding into people's minds. I have seen him give people new hearts and new minds, make them a new creature. I have seen him do things that were amazing, above and beyond anything we could ask or think. I have seen him myself do that, and I believe many of you could testify to the same thing, that you have seen that him do those things. He's the same God, and he can and he will do it again. He's currently active in your circumstances, aware of your circumstances, and absolutely able to change your circumstances. He can. He's done it before. He'll do it again. I hope you get the message. Hope you get the idea. I really think the repetitiveness of this miracle is on purpose to show us if he's done it once, he'll do it again. Hope that's been an encouragement to you here on a Tuesday evening. Hope you've enjoyed the lesson. We will be back next Tuesday, Lord willing, 7:30, same time, and on this Facebook and YouTube. You can check it out either way. But thank you for joining me. Please drop a comment in. I'd love to hear that you're here, get to see the chance to see that you're here. But also, if you've got questions or something about the study kind of piqued your interest, some comment you want to make, maybe you can bless other people with what you've learned as well. So thank you so much for joining me. Y'all have a great evening. Talk to you later. Bye now.